Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll begin with chapter 12, verse 26. So Moshe is describing to the Jewish people the mitzvah of Korban Pesach, in the book of Shmos, by the way. Moshe is describing to the Jewish people, the mitzvah of the Korban Pesach. Then he says a very peculiar pasuk, v'hayar, seemingly peculiar. V'hayar ki omru aleichem b'neichem, and when your children say to you, mo avodah zos lachem, what is this service for? Now, couldn't you say that for anything in the Torah? Couldn't you ask, what are your children want to ask you about this? What if your children want to ask you about that? Verse 27, Va'amartem, and you should respond, Zevach Pesach hu Hashem. It is an offering to God, a Pesach offering to God. Asher Pasach al botei bnei Yisrael Mitzrayim, that he passed over the Jewish homes in Egypt, B'nag Poes Mitzrayim V'spotenu Itzil, in his striking Egypt, and he saved our houses, and the nation bowed before God. Okay, so why the question? The answer seems to be a good answer, but the other thing that I'm sure is jumping out, at least to some of you, is we know this pasuk. This pasuk is what the Russia asks. This is the wicked son pasuk, but the answer is nothing like it. And by the way, the answer in this pasuk is also not the answer we say in the Haggadah for the Chacham, for the wise son, right? For the wise son, it says, tell him the laws of Pesach. So many of you have heard many divrei Torah on this, but maybe you'll hear something new. And if you don't, you will have the great pleasure of saying, oh, I already knew that. But before we get to the whole Rasha Chacham question, which is, of course, the best part of hearing a class. It's not gaining new information; it's being able to be a know-it-all. But that's okay. But we'll start with the Sforno, who's not on this question about the Rasha and the Chacham and the Haggadah. He's on a more basic question. What's the question about here anyway? And why couldn't you ask this about anything in the Torah? And how exactly does the answer appropriately respond to the question? Sforno on Pasuk Chafav. Mo havodah azos lachem. What is this service for you? She'ena biyom mikra kodesh kishar hakorbanos. This is an extremely unique korban because it's a korban oriented towards a holiday, and it's not being brought on the holiday. It's not surprising that there's a special korban for Pesach. What's surprising is if there's a special korban for Pesach, why don't you bring it on Pesach? This is the day before Pesach. V'lo toch zman shar korbanos, shu mitamid shel shachar ad tamid shel bein warbayim. And by the way, the standard model for offerings is they can be brought sometime during the day, in between the daily morning offering and the daily afternoon offering. This only can be brought in the afternoon. So the date is strange, the time is strange, and maybe the strangest thing, v'lama lo yaspik korban echad l'chol Yisrael, k'mo b'shar korbanos tzibur. Yeah, you want to have a special korban for Pesach? Great. Why don't you have one korban brought in the temple on behalf of the Jewish people? That's what we do for the other holidays. So why the day before Pesach? Why the narrow time frame of just the afternoon? And why does everybody have to bring a korban Pesach? Why isn't there just one on behalf of all of the Jewish people? And now let's see this photo on the next pasuk on Chav Zayin to explain how the next pasuk answers all these questions. But just before we go on, we now understand, according to the Sforno, why there'd be a very specific question by the child on this offering, because there's a lot of inconsistencies compared to other korbanos. Sforno on Chav Zayin, Zevach Pesachu, Zeh Zevach Nase B'Shvil HaPsicha, Shoisa Asida Le Asos, Bachatzi Halayla Shel Acharav. The whole purpose of this offering is as a merit that God will pass over our houses the night following. We don't do korbanos at night. The only thing that happens at night is the burning of leftover parts from other animals during the day. We don't bring korbanos at night. That's across the board. We don't bring sacrifices at night. So really, the sacrifice is for something happening at night, at the first night of Pesach. But we can't, so really the logical time to bring it would be during the first night of Pesach, but we can't do it because we don't bring sacrifice at night. So therefore what makes sense is we'll bring it the preceding day in the segment of the day that's most connected to the night. What's the segment of the day that's most connected to the night? The afternoon. V'hutzrach kol echad lahakriv, and everybody needs to bring an offering, or at least be included on an offering. Can't just have one communal offering. Because this miracle happened for each and every individual. And it wasn't a communal nace. It was every single house that God passes over. That's another miracle, because it's not happening in the Egyptian houses. And so therefore it's only appropriate that every household should be bringing a korban, because every household benefited in a very clear and very specific way. Now, just keeping that in mind, let's look back at the pasuk for a second. So again, the question was, this is a funny day for it. It's a funny time for it. And why does everyone have to do it anyway? So you should respond. It's an offering about passing over to God, as of connecting to a very specific moment that he passed over the houses of the Jewish people in Egypt. That happened at a very specific time. And therefore it makes sense that it shouldn't just be on the first day of Pesach. It should be before, leading into that. Espotenu hitzil, our houses he saved. And that's why each and every one of us bring it. It's just a nice thing to think about. I think in a sense it also makes that perspective, I think, brings home how we need to see Pesach as a personal holiday and not a national holiday. And there's just something to think about. I think it's something to think about at the Seder. It's more than, gosh, we're Jews and good things happen for the Jews. Every single Jewish home that didn't have a loss Pesach night felt this strong sense of connection to God, and it felt a strong sense of being chosen by God. And I think that's and the Korban Pesach, of course, is the centerpiece of Seder night, though we don't have a real Korban Pesach today. The Afikomen represents the Korban Pesach. But I think it's a very significant thing to think about when we're sitting at the Seder. Okay, now let's go to the Kli Yakar. Kli Yakar on Pasuk Chavav. V'ayaki omru aleichem b'neichem mo'av u'ta'azos lachem. Ba'agara shel Pesach masik, she'apasuk zeh medaber b'ben harasha. Omer derech lag mo'avodah azos milashon mo'enosh. So the Haggadah says that the language here is the language of, this is intended to be, we have an idea there are different questions in the Torah connected to Pesach in some way or another. So the Haggadah understands that this language is the question of the mocking son. Masik sham avatoa keyashina ve'morlo bavur zeh asa Hashem li b'tzeis Mitzrayim. And we quote a pasuk from later on in the Chumash that you're supposed to say back to him, this is why God took me out of Egypt. Leave lo famous thing. The implication that we're saying to the son is, he took me out of Egypt. If you would have been there, you wouldn't have made it. And people ask the question, if this is the question of the wicked son, why don't we quote the answer that the Torah says? Why do we have to cross-reference some other pasuk? Let's say, explain to him, this is the offering to God, like it says in our pasuk. And instead we pluck an answer from a place that's not adjoining to the question. By the way, that pasuk is also used in the Haggadah for the child that doesn't know to ask. We use the same pasuk as an answer to two different children in the Haggadah. Why are we double dipping with it? Especially because there's a separate answer here that's said for this pasuk. But secondly, we make a whole big deal at the Haggadah. Me and not him. If the wicked son would have been there, he wouldn't have been redeemed. We quote the exact same pasuk. We don't say that to the child that doesn't know how to ask. You don't know how to ask questions? I guess he wouldn't have been redeemed. We don't say that. We don't say that at the Seder. How could we extract two totally different approaches from the same pasuk? Strange. So now he cites the Abarbanel, this Oral Kush Yoselim Sefer Zevach Pesach Shalom, So the Abarbanel is moved by these questions, and the Kli Yakar feels the Abarbanel's answers are difficult to process. So now open your eyes and see. So he says, I think there are three ways to look at what's going on with the wicked son. Derech Risha, the first approach. Shapasuk v'amartem zevach Pesach eino nikshar im pasuk shalom alakla. He says maybe the way to read the pasuk is this verse is not connected to the preceding verse, the verse of the answer. Fu milsa ba'apei nafshe. This verse actually stands on its own. The proof that this verse stands on its own and it's not a response to the question in the previous verse. This is a really interesting point. If you look at 26, it's in the plural. When your sons say to you. So it's just interesting that in 27, well, I'm sorry, I think I'm making the wrong emphasis. I'm sorry. If it's a response to 26, you should say to them. It doesn't say you should say to anyone, just a say. The image, if you were looking at 27, in a vacuum, it would be what a person's supposed to say before they eat the Korban Pesach. It doesn't sound like what you're supposed to respond to someone, because if it's a response to someone, it should say to them. What's the famous pasuk about Pesach? Vigadata levincha. Tell to your son. It doesn't say tell, it says tell your son. So it should say here, say to your son. It doesn't say that. Vilama shinakan because of Amartam Zevach Pesach lo pierced the Yomar. Vyod Kash, another difficulty. Lama Omar b'chol makom ala Pesach v'avoda toas v'avoda v'kan Omar ushmartem es v'avoda azos. That's an interesting thing. At the end of verse 25, the pasuk before we began today, the language is you should guard this service, as opposed to you should perform this service. Vyod Kash, another difficulty. Shebechol makom kara banim b'lashon yachid. Ki lahalam nemar v'gadat levincha. Benatam amar v'yaki shalcha vincha lemor mazos. Benachacham nemar parshas v'eschanan ki shalcha vincha machar lemor mazos. Bekana amar v'yaki amru alechem b'nechem lashon ram. This is another difficulty. Is all the other psukim in the Torah of speaking to the child? It's exactly that. It's singular. It's child. And here I got a little bit flipped around. Here in 26, it's children. So these are three questions, or 3 points the Kli Yakar makes. One is that 27 sounds like it's not a response to a child, it's just a freestanding statement. 25, the end of it, why is it talk about guarding this service as opposed to performing this service? And finally, why are the children referred to in 26 in the plural as opposed to the singular? These are the questions the Kli Yakar poses, and he clearly is going to go somewhere with all these questions, but we'll have to find out where he goes tomorrow, God willing. So we asked these questions today about the wicked pasuk, the pasuk for the wicked son versus the one who doesn't know how to ask, and why the answer isn't cited. We also spoke about the sforno of a novel idea in terms of what the child is asking and what the response is.